In this series, you've already learned to draw the fashion face and head, as well as hands and different hand gestures, and now we're going to start working on the 10 heads croquis. For this introduction lesson, we're going to learn about the history of the croquis, why we have certain measurements on there, and then eventually in this series, you're going to learn to do a walking pose, a standing pose, and the back view pose. So in this series, what we're learning is how to draw your own custom croquis. If you Google what a croquis is, you'll notice that it's a fashion sketch or a quick sketch. And basically, what this is for us in the fashion industry is this is a simple, basic model laid out, and she has specific measurements on here, and you're going to use those as you're drawing clothes on top of the croquis. The tools that you'll be needing to complete the whole series will be your printed handouts, and again this is the 8.5 by 14. The first 3 pages that are in color, you don't need to print them, you can just view them digitally, and also you'll see me go through this in the video. And then starting with page 4, you're going to want to print that out all the way through the end to page 12. And we're going to use this as a workbook. So you're going to be drawing on all of these pages and turning these into me. There's also another printout where we're practicing getting our measurements on different size heads, as well as making our measurements on different size bodies. And these are on 8.5 by 11s. You'll also want to have a piece of blank paper, so while you're watching the video and taking notes, you'll have something to write on and to draw on. And we're going to use a number 2 pencil for the demo. If you have art pencils, you can use your HB art pencil. Go ahead and also have a red, blue, and yellow color pencil ready to go for jotting down any other details. And then you're going to want to have a plastic eraser as well as a detail eraser. And make sure the one that you have is white, not pink or some other color. And of course, you're going to want a pencil sharpener and a clear ruler. While I'm working with these croquis, you'll notice a lot of times that I'll be referring to them as 10 heads tall. So that's what we're going to learn right now. Let's take a look at some fashion books that reference drawing a croquis. One of the most popular fashion books back when I was in school was this 9 Heads book. And the reason why they're calling it 9 heads is because your croquis, if her head was this tall and you measured down 9 of those heads, you would get to the ankle. The reason why they're going all the way to the ankle and cutting the feet off is because sometimes your person is standing flat-footed or sometimes they're wearing high heels. But this would always be consistent for a 9 heads figure. So then something that I learned was you would break it down to where's the bust, the waist, the hip, the knees, and then you would start to come in and detail it out with how wide are certain things, and then you would continue drawing until you had your final croquis. So this is a fashion textbook from Steven Stippelman, and he taught at FIT in New York City, and I was fortunate enough to be a student while he was still a professor there. In his book, he talks about the 10 heads figure. And the reason he does that is because he'll include all the way down to the toes if she's wearing high heels. So in this instance, you'll see the final figure here has high heels. And he's throwing out these different specs and measurements which are standard inside of the fashion industry. Following along with the same specs is very, very important, especially when you're working with different languages. So if my drawings will go from the US and sent out to Turkey, and I don't speak Turkish, but they can look at my drawings and know and understand exactly what I want because I'm following the same standards that they're used to seeing. This is very similar to if you play soccer in other nations, it's all the same rules, or tennis or chess. And that's what we're establishing here in the fashion industry. So it's already pretty much set in stone. And what you need to do as a new fashion designer is to learn these rules and then follow them with a little bit of your own deviations or a little bit of your own style. And you'll see a few teachers might teach you a couple things slightly different, but basically they're extremely close to what you see right here. And this is what I'm going to teach you. And then you'll notice also when you study from other languages, like if you're taking classes in Japan or in Spain, you'll notice that it's all the same measurements, all the same specs. This book is one of my favorite books for using for fashion. And this is a book where once you buy this, this will be a reference that you'll just keep for the rest of your career. So right away when you get into the book, the very first chapter is learning the fashion figure proportions. You'll see as you come in here, she has a really good description of showing a fashion rendering if you were doing petite sizes. And then if you moved into just your regular model sizes, so this would be your 9 heads model. And then moving into the full 10 heads figure would be similar to what I was learning from Stippelman. What I'm going to teach you is something pretty much right in between these two right here. And then you'll decide as a designer which way you want to go. You could stay with exactly how I teach you, or you can make your girls even longer looking or shorten them back down a little bit. Something else that I really like about this book is it goes into showing you the men's. So here you'll see there's the specs for drawing a men's figure, and then some of the adjustments that you would do if you're doing the men's view. It also has a whole section for doing children's wear. So for instance, infants, you would have them sitting on the ground because they don't stand yet. And then moving into toddlers and children a little bit older than the toddler age. So 4 to 6 years old, 2 to 4 years old. And it's showing you how many heads tall would these figures be. And then it'll move into children, boys, and then they have a section for tween girls, teen girls. So here what we have is, this is just a photo of a girl, swimsuit model, and she's also a popular athlete for swimming. And she's just standing here, and nothing about this photo has been altered. So this is just a normal human being. Now if you were to take from the top of her skull, and remember, we're not talking about the top of her hair. We're starting from the top of what would be her skull if she shaved her head. Down to her chin would be the total of 1 head. If you were to take that measurement and keep going down until you got to her feet, you would find that she's 8 heads tall. If we were to start to find, okay, where are certain features on her body and where do they hit along these measurements, that's what this is here off to the side. So for instance, her chin is at 1 heads down. The shoulders would be 1 head and a quarter. Her bust level would be 2 heads down. Her waist would be a little bit above 3, so 2 3/4. Her high hip, 3 1/4. The full hip would be here around 3 1/4, 3 3/4. The bottom of her swimsuit just a little bit below 4. Her knees would be in between 5 and 6, and her ankle would be somewhere around 7 1/2. So if you notice, these measurements here, some of them are kind of weird. 2.75, 3.75, 4.1. Wouldn't it be cool if we could take these measurements, fudge them around a little bit, and make them just a little more rounded off so it's easier to memorize? And also, if I was drawing clothes, you would know exactly where I'm putting seams because we have a more basic standard. So that's kind of what has been happening with the fashion industry over the years. So taking this a little bit further, we get all the way up into what we have now is the 10 heads figure. Basically what's happened is her neck has gotten longer, so we could bring her armhole down right to 2. We could have the full hip at 4. And then we've added length down here to her legs. And this is going to accommodate for different hem lengths on skirts and dresses and pants. And then we have her knees down here at 6.5. And then there's a few more details that you're going to want to know as a designer for clothing. So for instance, if 2 is the bottom of the armhole from drawing shirts, her bust apex would be just a little bit below that, so 2.25. You would want to know where's her rib cage, because her rib cage and her shoulders are going to move locked together. And then from her hip bones down to the bottom of her swimsuit, those are also going to move locked together. In between that, we'll have the waist. You'll want to know where the hip bones are. So then as you're drawing girls standing at an angle, you'll have a little corner for a hip bone. And then we'll move down, like I said before, we'll have the knees at 6.5. And we're going to also want to know where's the inside ankle and the outside ankle. So the inside ankle would be here at 9, outside ankle 9.25, and all the way to the floor would be 10. On this chart, what we're seeing here is the heights. So this is all the different features and the height that they are compared to the 10 heads figure. Something else that you're going to want to know is widths. Well, how wide is her waist? How wide are her shoulders? So that one you're going to see on page 2. And what we're doing is we're finding that the shoulder is 1.5 heads wide. The rib cage 3/4 wide. That hip bones, the high hip would be exactly 1 head wide, and the full hip again would be back to 1.5 heads, same as the shoulder. And then what I'm going to do is, in a little bit, I'm going to teach you how to find these measurements by using the head. So when you split it up to draw your features, you can also use these measurements to come in here and start to establish the widths of your croquis figure. So at some point in time, you are going to have to memorize all of these heights, all of these levels, and then you're going to also have to memorize the widths here. So then when you're sitting down and drawing, you can just move quick and have this all done just out of memory. So here on page 3, we have some examples of why is the waist and the neck so small on your models. Like how come? Why is this girl so skinny and so tall and long? What is the benefit of doing that? Let's imagine that we have a girl, and she's just your normal, average, everyday girl, and when she goes shopping, she's a size 6. If we take that size 6 woman, add some guides on top of her, and then we can go ahead and start drawing some pants and a jacket. And I'm making sure to be really diligent that the jacket fits perfect on her neck, her shoulders, and the waist, and it goes over the pants. And if we move this jacket off to the side and complete drawing the full-size jacket as well as the pants to go with it. And then let's imagine I take this drawing and I send it off to a factory to have a sample made. What are they going to make me? Probably a size 10 petite. The reason being is because it's so wide in the neck and on the shoulders and in the waist, and the pants look so short. But that's not what I intended. Here's what I want. I wanted a size 6 women's jacket. So it should be more narrow in the neck and the shoulders, and it should look longer and more fitted. So if we take that jacket, move it off to the side, and make a guide to match and a pair of pants to go with this, then what is left is, well, what does the girl look like? So here we can see we have a size 6 women's 10 heads figure inside of this drawing that would be interpreted correctly by the factory. And this is why croquis look the way they do, and this is why fashion artists draw the way they draw. So here we can see we have some big, fun, puffy sweaters with multiple layers and large collars. And you can see that starting with the 10 heads figure, once you draw these on there, they still look like they're size 6 sweaters. Here's another example of a big puffy jacket where the collar here is intended to be open and off of her neck, but still having it fitted into the waist with a large belt and then big puffy cuffs. So you can see as well, starting with the 10 heads figure allows you to have room to come out and open things up intentionally, instead of you accidentally getting a jacket that's too wide in the neck because a 8 heads figure was also too large in the neck. Now that you understand why the 10 heads figure is so narrow in the waist and shoulders and neck, so you can make a jacket look like it is truly a women's size 6 jacket. Your next question should be, well, why are the legs so long? And the reason being is this is to accommodate for all the different hem lengths on your skirts and dresses. So if we were to take a look from foreheads down, and you could start to develop, we would have a mini skirt down at 5.5, and you still have room for the business skirt above the knee at 6, and a knee length skirt going down to 6.5. When we move into our midi length and T length, you'll notice that there's a nice differentiation between the middle of the calf and going below the calf, as well as giving you room if you're going to have multiple layer dresses on one garment. Moving all the way down to the ankle at 9.25, you can see there's lots of room for fit, flare, and A-line skirts, as well as the full dramatic look of going all the way to the floor and having lots of room to puff out off of her hips without making the dress look like it's too large and too puffy. So you can see now that having these different multiple lengths set at the different measurements is easy for the factory to recognize the exact hems that you want on your garments. Here's a couple other examples of why it's nice to have your 10 heads figure so skinny in the waist. When you come down and you're doing full length gowns, it's nice if you can add on things like, for instance, bows and sashes, and they will come out off of their drawing, off of the hips of the drawing. So this is giving you room going from something so small to coming out here to something larger, but still having it be a slender looking size 6 model. As well, when you're starting to move into really puffy dresses, this gives you lots of room to come out and show a nice big puffy dress because you're starting from such a small waist in the first place. So you can see here that if the waist was larger, like if this was an 8 heads tall girl with a larger waist and you wanted to puff the skirt out this much and you had to end it here, it would look really strange. It wouldn't quite have the same flow that you're looking for. So having the girl at 10 heads tall with the smaller waist, then you're able to come in and have these really puffy, elegant dresses that go all the way down to the floor. So here's a good example at looking at multiple hem lengths. And this would be something where the factory is going to look at your drawings and try and interpret to give you exactly what you want. So we can see here on this small demi dress where it's coming up to her full hip level, and you can still see the bottom of her crotch level, and you can see that these would be little boy shorts. And then when you move into this dress here, it is going below the crotch level, so this would be drawn down to about 4.5 heads down. So we can see that that's longer than her full hip. These two dresses here, we can see that there is multiple hem lengths. So for instance, this side of the hem is starting at the high hip and is moving down to the full hip, and then we have down here at the full hip moving below the crotch level. So this would be more towards 5 heads down, like a mini skirt length. Same thing is going on here. And then we move into having a full length dress right here, as well as noticing that this one is at the ankle. So we'll have floor length, ankle length. And then when we look at the slits on these two dresses, this one is shorter. It's coming up to the knee height, and this one's coming all the way back to just underneath her swimsuit level. So this would be higher than a mini skirt. So you can see just by drawing these consistently at 10 heads tall, the factory will know exactly what you want. So again, along with memorizing all the different heights as well as all the different widths, you're going to want to memorize the different hem lengths. And this will help you, again, when you're drawing and you're moving quickly and you'll know what hem length you want to do. It'll already be in your head what to aim for down on her legs. For this next section of the video, you're going to want to already have printed out your pages from the Croquis 8.5 by 14, pages 4, 5, and 6. Print those in grayscale. As well as there's the measuring heads and croquis. This is the 8.5 by 11s. And you'll want to print these as well because we're about to start on these. And this is also part of your homework for turning this in. Along with memorizing all of these different measurements and their placements on your 10 heads figure, we also need to know what are the widths of certain locations. If you notice on the widths, their measurements, some of them are smaller than a head and some of them are larger than a head. So what would help is if we had a system to come in here and break down the head into different measurements, then we can use those out here to find our widths. So some of the measurements that we're going to need is you're going to want to know what is halfway down on her head. So if you recall, when we were learning to draw a face, this was the same as her eye line. So you would come down, you'd find the halfway point between the top of her skull and the bottom of her chin. Boom, that was her eye line. Once we came down again, this was halfway from the eye line to the chin. Remember, this was just below the tip of the nose, and that becomes 3/4, because if you start from the top of the skull and you measure down, this would be 3/4 of a head. Another measurement we want to have is what is 1/8. So if we were to go from the bottom of the nose back to the chin and divide that in half, this was the bottom of her lip. The reason we want that is because over here, if you were to go from 1/8 back to the half, you're having a total of 3/8. The reason why 3/8 is so important is because down here at the rib cage and hip bones, these are only 3/4 of a head wide. And if you knew your center line and you were starting to establish the widths of her body, it's easier to start from the middle and move out. So you would, at that point, you would need to know what was half of 0.75. So basically half of 3/4 is 3/8. So at that point, if you have the 3/8 measurement from her face, you can start at the center line and measure out 3/8 the rib cage and the hip bones, and then repeating on this side. And then the total is going to be 3/4. So you can go from the top of her skull down to the tip of her nose, and this is 3/4 total. So that's why it's important to know this measurement, 3/8 of a head. And then some other ones that are fairly simple. At the high hip, it's 1 head total. So here you would just take from the top of the skull to the chin, you would have your 1 head total. And if you want to start from the center and move outwards, then it would be half of a head. So you would have half of a head from the center going out, half of a head going out. Down at the full hip, we have a head and a half, and the same as well as at her shoulder width. The way you would find that would be 3/4 of a head on both sides. So for instance, I can go from the top of the skull down to the 3/4 mark, which is just below the tip of her nose. And then from the center, I could go out 3/4 and down here at the full hip, and then repeat that measurement here at the shoulder and full hip. And then the total will be 1.5 heads. So take out your 2 homework pages from Measuring Croquis. And we're going to work first of all here with this page 1. Now you'll notice there's already an example provided inside the box. So here we have a box, and then we've broken it down to the half, 3/4, 1/8, and then we found our 3/8 off to the side. What you're going to do is you're going to follow me. I'm going to do it in a demo right now, and you're going to follow me by doing your very first assignment. And you'll notice in your box I already have the center line in here. So the very first thing we could do is get that going across. So for me, since this is a fairly large box, what I'll do is I'll take the measurement using my rulers, 3 5/8, to find that halfway point. Again, when you're working at a smaller scale, I'd recommend getting used to the technique where you would just guess where do you think the halfway point is, and then you would come in here and you would check to see if you're correct. And if you're off by a little bit, you would adjust it by making a slightly larger mark, and then check your new mark. And if the location's correct, then you can use your ruler to straighten that out. So go ahead and do that here on your number 1, and I'll do it here on mine. Make sure you draw your line long enough beyond the side of the face here, so we have room to write the symbols for 1/2. Now let's find the next one. So this is going to go from the halfway point down to the chin. Again, we're finding what's half of this. So at first I'm just going to guess, then I'll come in and I'll check my measurement. And if it's incorrect, I'll draw a new mark a little bit darker, a little bit longer. And we'll square this across. And that's going to be our next one down, which is going to be 3/4. The next one down is going to be 1/8. So again, this is going to be from the 3/4 mark heading down towards her chin. So if you remember, that would be just below the tip of her nose to the chin. The halfway point would be the bottom of her bottom lip. And over here you'll write 1/8. Now this 1/8 measurement, you don't really need it, but we're trying to establish 3/8, and that we're going to put on this side. So what I want you to do is only from the 1/8 line come off to this side, and only from the eye line come off to this side. If your 3/4 line went past the side of her face a little bit, go ahead and take a minute to erase that. So again, it's only the halfway point and the 1/8. Now between these, the total would equal 3/8. So put a diagram in here where it looks like that's the distance for 3/8. Something that else is helpful. You could also put in some arrowheads if that helps you to know that that's your 3/8 distance from here to here. So that's the basics on laying out the measurements on the faces to get ready to do measurements for your croquis. Go ahead, and we just finished number 1 together. Go ahead and do 2, 3, 4, and 5. You'll notice that they're all different sizes, so you're not able to duplicate the same measurements all the way across. So just be careful that you know number 2 and number 3 are different sizes than number 1. So let's go now to the next page in your homework assignment. And basically what we're doing here is we're finding that the one head is already provided, but we need all of the dots in between. So we need to know where 4, 5, 6, 9, 8, 7, where are they in between here? So looking back at an actual croquis, here we have this is one head total, and then as we come down, you'll see there was these little dark marks in here. So then I would know where 5 and 6 were. I know where 6 and 7. I can find the middle of her knees. So you have to have all of these dots laid out before you start drawing your girls. To follow along with you, what I'll do is I have a larger printout, so this is easier for you to see on the video. And go ahead with your exercise number 6. Go ahead and start on this one while I'm doing this one with you. So off to the side here, you can see this is an example of what all of yours should look like. So it already has a head, it already has the floor. We need the marks in between. So you work on number 6, I'll do this one. So for me, since I'm right-handed, I like to turn the paper here so her head is over by my right side. And then I can use my pencil to measure one head. So again, I'm using the tip of the pencil at her chin, and my fingernail is right here at the top of her skull. Then what I could do is I can move my fingernail down to her chin and get my first mark. And then again, I'll just keep repeating this as I head down towards the floor. Now for mine, I didn't quite make it there. Something was off. And if I come back and count these, I'll see if I was too big or too small. So 1 is the chin, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So basically, mine are coming up a little bit short because here I have number 10, but the floor should be here because I've already figured these out mathematically in Illustrator. So this lets me know that when I was using this technique, I was coming up just a little bit short on each one. So I'm going to go ahead and erase these and do it again. So now I have it complete all the way through. If you like your dots, everything matched up really well, then let's go ahead and make these into small lines. And then let's label these together. So again, from the top of the skull to the chin is 1, and 1 is already provided. So the next one is 2, 3, 4, and so on, until you get down to 10. So go ahead and double check yours now and make sure that it's perfect, and then keep practicing. So size for number 7, 8, and 9, these are all different sizes. So each time you do this, you'll have to retake the measurement from the head that is provided. Once you have completed doing 1 through 5 for taking measurements of the head, just double check that everything looks exactly like the example here. And then 6 through 7, all of these should have the marks and the lines in there, just like the example from number 1, as well as labeling them with the numbers 2 through 9 to match up with the 1 and the 10 that are already provided. So scan these and turn these into me as part of your homework for this assignment. For the next part of the assignment, you're going to want to already have printed out pages 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to work on these together.